Well, hello everyone and good morning. My name is Jesse. I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and a big welcome to all of you as a new audience joining us today. We've got groups in New York, Hawaii, all across Ontario and beyond. And if you are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now you're catching us in a very exciting day because we're pretty much wrapping up another week with over 60 broadcasts already this school year. It's been a wild ride, so thank you for joining along with that. All of those are on our YouTube channel if you want to explore and discover all sorts of cool stuff from the coolest scientists and explorers on planet Earth. But most of all, it's exciting because we are continuing our epic If Then Frontiers for Young Minds Doubleheader Super Extravaganza series. Now, last year, we partnered with the amazing folks at Frontiers for Young Minds, which connects scientists with kids like you to write articles that are accessible to absolutely everyone of all ages, and the amazing folks at If Then. Now, If Then showcases and celebrates the most incredible women in STEM on planet Earth, from lab coat to astronaut gear to everywhere in between. They highlight the coolest ambassadors on the planet. We did an amazing series of them last year. And this year, by complete fluke, those two organizations partnered together on an epic If Then Frontiers for Young Minds Women's Science Collection, which you can check out right there. I'll be sharing that with all our registered classes. So we had to jump in and join them for an epic broadcast series. Now, we've already done 3 programs in this series: earthquake geology, information science, and more. Later today, we have another one on deep sea exploration, but I'm so thrilled for you all to meet Karli Weatherill, joining us today from Dr. Joe Varner's lab to talk about pikas, the cutest animal out there in the world. No questions asked. There's no debate. It's over. The competition's been won. And so Karli's going to talk to us a little bit today about her amazing work to understand this incredible creature and her work going up into the mountains to explore and learn about their amazing habitat. So without further ado, with a frog in my throat, we're going to talk about pikas today. Karli, thank you so much for joining and welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to present to you today. I'm a student from Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction, and I study the world's cutest mammal, also known as the pika. So today I'm going to share with you what it's like to study pikas. And if you didn't already know, this furry creature right here in this picture is a pika. And this is what a pika sounds like. Isn't that so cute? All right, so before we get into pikas, I'm going to share with you how I became a pika biologist. So I've only studied pikas for about 2 years, but I've always loved animals. And as a kid, I loved going to the zoo. I would go camping a lot with my family and spend a lot of time in the mountains. So I came into college wanting to be a veterinarian because I loved my dogs so much and I really wanted to help them. But when I got to college, I learned that some of my professors were wildlife biologists and that they studied wild animals. And I had no idea that existed, but I thought it would be the perfect career for me because I loved animals and I loved being outside. So I wanted to get involved, and I read about Dr. Varner and her work with pikas, and it sounded so cool to me. And I never thought a job so fun and rewarding existed. So long story short, I ended up going to the La Salle Mountains a couple days after meeting Dr. Varner, and I got the full pika fieldwork experience. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I went on this trip, and it was a lot harder than I expected. We started hiking when it was dark, and I didn't bring enough food, and it was super cold, but somehow I still remember it being such a fun experience, being out in the mountains with a bunch of women studying wild animals in these beautiful places. And I took that as a sign that this was something that I wanted to continue doing. All right, so now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this special animal, where they live and where you can see them, and then I'll share what we do as scientists to help understand them. All right, so what are pikas? Pikas are small mammals that are closely related to rabbits, and you may think that they look like a mouse, but they actually are not related to rodents, and they're lagomorphs. And pikas typically live in the mountains. So pikas typically live in rocky slopes and high mountains, usually above 8,000 feet. And this here is a picture of me in Pika Habitat. So right here in the middle is me, and then I'm standing in a rock slide, and this is where the pikas like to live. And this picture was actually taken at our study site in the La Salle Mountains in Utah. All right, so if we look at a map of the United States, you can see that the area highlighted in yellow is where we find pikas. So this star here is where I am from in Grand Junction. And if you've ever gotten to spend some time in the Western North America, in US or in Canada, you might have been able to see pikas. Not shown on this map, there's actually a second species of pika that is found in northern Canada and in parts of Alaska called the collared pika. And it looks really similar to the American pika, and it lives in similar habitats, but it's a different species, and it looks a little bit different than the American pika. All right, so now I'm going to show you guys this picture, and I want to see if you can spot the pika. So there's a pika hiding somewhere in here, and it kind of looks like a fluffy rock on top of another rock.
Ah, I found it. I think, Karli, maybe sort of halfway to the left side. That was really tricky. These are my worst games for me. And if anyone wants to chime in online, but I think he's like sort of on the left side, right about middle of the picture. It looks like a fluffy rock coming out of a rock, like you said.
You're so right. That's the pika right there. So something else that you might notice when looking at this picture of this pika and the pika habitat is this big pile of grass and wildflowers off to the right side. And if you think that that might be the pika's food, you'd be right. So something that makes pikas extra special is that unlike most animals found in high mountain habitats, pikas don't hibernate in the winter. So pikas have to stay awake all winter long underneath the snow. And during that time, pikas need to eat, but there's not a lot of food available for them in the winter because it's so cold. So what pikas do that live in these habitats is they have to build huge food caches during the summer. So they fill these piles with all their favorite grasses and flowers, and then throughout the winter, they eat that food while they're awake underneath the snow. So here we have a pika on the left of this grass pile, and he's next to 62 pounds of food for the winter. So all that food is just for him. He doesn't share with any other pikas because that pika needs all of that food to get through the cold winter. And 62 pounds might not sound like a lot of food, but based on the size of a pika, that's actually a ton because the pika is just the size of a potato, remember? And if you scale that amount of food to the amount that a human would have to get, if a human was behaving like a pika, it would actually be 20,000 pounds of food, not including the packaging that our food comes in. So in order to get 20,000 pounds of food, we would have to make 5,000 trips to the grocery store in just 3 months. And on every single one of those 5,000 trips, we would have to carry home 4 pounds of food in our mouth. And to give you an idea, 4 pounds is about 2 to 3 heads of lettuce. So the next time you guys go to the grocery store, make sure to look at the potatoes and then go and see how big the heads of lettuce are. And imagine carrying 4 heads of lettuce in your mouth 5,000 times back to your house all summer long. And that would be a full-time job. And that's exactly how much work it takes to be a pika. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like when a pika collects food to bring back to its home. And what you're going to see is a pika moving really fast across the rocks, bouncing up and down, and he's going to have a big thing of leaves in his mouth. He's going to come up in a second. There he is. He's going to come back out and put it away in his house. All right. So that pika is doing really well, and it's probably going to have some great food over the winter. But there are other parts about the pika's living situation that are pretty complicated. So one of the problems that pikas have is that they're really sensitive to summer temperatures, and also their body temperature is really. So a pika that is healthy and just hanging out, not sick, has a resting temperature about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. And for us as humans, that would be a really high temperature. And if you had a temperature that was 104 degrees Fahrenheit, you'd probably have to go to the doctor. But for pikas, they have a really thick layer of fur and a really high metabolic rate for their size. So they are able to generate a lot of heat, and also they're able to withstand a lot of heat. However, this also means that it's really easy for them to overheat and get too hot. So after just 2 hours left at 75 degrees, a pika can overheat and may have a really hard time living. But pikas know this, so they go underneath the rocks where it is cool and shady so that they don't overheat. And this is something that we call behavioral thermoregulation. But some pikas have actually disappeared due to the warmer temperatures known as climate change. So this is a study that was done by another scientist named Eric Beaver. And in this study, he did a study of the Great Basin in the United States. So this black outline that you can see here around Nevada is the Great Basin. And then we have the bordering states, Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, and California. And these colored dots on here represent the places where we know that there were pikas about 100 years ago. So these researchers went out to each of these sites and looked for pikas to see if they still lived where they did 100 years ago. And what he found was that almost half of the sites didn't have pikas anymore. And they thought that this could be because the pikas had moved to another place with other pikas, or they had died out, or they moved up the mountain to a place that they liked better that may be a little bit more cooler for them. So the sites where we lost pikas tended to be lower in elevation, below 9,000 feet. They tended to be warmer in the summer. They had less habitat area above a certain elevation, and they were less connected to mainland populations. And this means that pikas were more isolated, and they lived closer to the tops of the mountains and didn't like going down to be connected to other populations because it was a little bit too warm down there for them. So that study taught us the importance of studying isolated populations of pikas because they may be more vulnerable to warmer temperatures. And for the last few years, I've been a part of a project that studies isolated mountain ranges. Specifically, we study the La Salle mountain range in Utah. And this mountain range is special because it is surrounded by desert, and nobody had pikas in this area before. So as you can see on this left top picture is mostly flat desert and rock, and then all of a sudden there's these snowy mountains in the background. And then if you can also see on the right, we have the white tops are here where the pikas live, and then the green surrounding is just the forest of the mountains, and then you see this big ring of red desert all around. So this really just highlights how isolated this mountain range is, and that there's not really any other places for the pikas to go because they can't cross miles and miles of red desert. So now I'm going to share with you some of the work that we do day to day when we go out and study pikas. So one of the first things we do is we estimate pika density and food resources. So we go out and we see how much food is available for pikas, and also how much food is available. We also place temperature sensors in the crevices of the rocks. So here's a picture of me placing a temperature sensor, and what we do is we weave this sensor that's tied to a long wire into the rocks. And we're doing this so that we're not measuring the temperatures that we experience outside, but we can measure the temperatures that the pikas experience when they're in the rocks where it's nice and shady and cool. Because the pikas, remember, they don't like to be out on the surface of the rocks because it gets a little bit too hot out there for them. In addition to the temperature sensors, we also place camera traps out to spy on the pikas. So these cameras have motion sensors that start taking a video whenever it detects a pika. So here's a video of a pika. Oops, doesn't look like it wants to play, but here's a video of a pika that is coming and bringing some hay to his hay pile. And this is really cool because we can see what kind of food they're eating. So this pika looks like it's eating mostly grass. And then we can see how often the pika is coming back and haying. All right, so another cool thing that we do is every year we go out into the field and we trap pikas. So first we fill the traps with vegetation, and then we cut up apples to bait the pikas to go into the trap. And if you look on the bottom right, that's a picture of me filling the trap. And we also encase the traps in rock so that it's so the pika doesn't really know what's in there, and it will try to go underneath it. And then we do something very similar to an alien abduction, where we take the pika back to the tent and we use an anesthesia so the pika doesn't know what's going on. And then we can take measurements of the pika's health. And this doesn't hurt the pika whatsoever. We just weigh them, we measure them, and then we add some special colored ear tags to their ears so that we can identify the pika later, because they each have different ear tag colors. And then we can track them the year after, and we can look at them and see if that pika is still there or if it's not anymore. And one of the coolest parts of trapping animals is that afterward we get to release them back into the habitat that we tracked them. And here's me releasing a pika, one of my first times. Just really, really, really cool to see them up close. They'll go run off back to its home. It was really exciting. All right. And then we also collect their scat samples. So this is a picture of me in the background, reaching deep into the rocks to get the pika scat. So sometimes their latrines, which is where they have their piles of scat, are really, really deep in the rocks. So you really have to get in there to grab them. And then a picture on the bottom right is a picture of what a latrine is. So we try to collect the fresh scat from the top of the latrine. And then we go back into the lab, and on the bottom left, you can see me doing an immunoassay to measure the concentration of hormone in their scat. So this is just a fancy way of saying that we take the poop, we crush it up, and then we look and see how much hormone is in there so we can see how much stress the pika has. We also do behavior surveys in the field to watch the pikas. And this is really fun because we get to see how the pika lives, and we get to know their personality. So the picture on the right is what we see when we look through the binoculars, and you can see them up close, and usually they just stare at you or they scream at you. So it's just really fun to watch them. All right, so that's all that I really do in the field. But when I'm not in the field watching pikas, I am a student, as I said, at Colorado Mesa University, and my major is biology, ecology, evolution, and organismal. And I also have a music minor. But some of the classes that I take include animal biology, plant biology, genetics, cell biology, ecology, and conservation biology. And some of the ones that you might not think I have to take are chemistry, physics, and statistics, or math. And then here's just some pictures of my plant anatomy lab and then my animal biology lab. And we get to use a lot of microscopes. And then we also do a lot of like field activities where we go out into the field and interact with the animals and observe them. So my classes are very hands-on, but also like applied into the field. So in addition to getting to help these cute animals, the best part of this career is being in the mountains because it is just so beautiful. And I also really enjoy it because I get to travel. So last summer I went to Alaska, and this summer I went to Boulder to present at what we like to call grown-up science fairs, where we just stand with our poster and teach people about the research we've been doing. And also just going to the LaSalle's every summer and getting to do the trapping and the releasing of pikas is just super, super fun and enjoyable. All right, so if you are thinking about being a pika biologist or another wildlife biologist, here's some good qualities that it takes. It's really important that you're in good physical condition because pikas live at really high elevations, and that means that you have to go to high elevations too, and sometimes that can be really hard, but also really fun. Also, having a lot of patience and a lot of good attention to detail is really helpful. And also playing well with others. So science is a very community-based field, so you have to be able to work with your collaborators well. You have to be able to work with other students very well. Also, spatial awareness is important. When you're watching pikas, you have to be able to see them because sometimes they dart. And also, you have to be able to find your temperature sensors after a whole winter. You have to remember where they are. Also, having a really good attitude. Sometimes the field conditions are, they're super hard, and the weather you can't always predict. So you have to have a good attitude through that all. And then also you have to enjoy hiking on unstable rocks because where pikas live on unstable rocks. So it's helpful if you're able to do that. All right. Lastly, having intellectual curiosity, responsibility, and following through, and also being ready to spend the summer outside in beautiful places. All right. And thank you for listening. And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Oh, fantastic, Karli. Thank you so much. And what a cool deep dive into what it's got to be one of the coolest jobs to have in North America. Honestly, it looks like that the releasing of the pika is like pure absolute joy. I like at the beginning, it's like, oh no, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to scare the pika. And then it's gone and it's, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That is so fun. Well, we've already got a bunch of questions, so we're going to dive in. And anyone else who wants to chime in on YouTube, please do share. We've got about 15 minutes together, so lots of time for Q&A. You highlighted a little bit of this at the end, so we'll come back to one of the questions at the very end. But let's see, what eats pikas? Are there any predators that are out there that you need to be worrying about, or the pikas are sort of nervous about? Anything you can share?
Yes, there's a couple predators that I know of in the La Salle Mountains. So there's weasels, which are just they're really long mammals, and they are predators of pikas. And also there's hawks, so they fly above and then they can see the pikas. So a couple.
Curiosity. So in a lot of animals, when they have predators that can come from the ground or the air, will have different calls to indicate which one's which to sort of warn their friends. Do you know if pikas have that, like it's a hawk call versus it's a weasel coming at me, or is it just a general like, do you know?
I'm not sure. I'm sure it's maybe been studied, but they definitely do call when they see predators. I know that they do it when there's hawks, and like all of them, you'll just hear a bunch of like yelling and screaming at each other to warn each other. But weasels are a little bit more sneaky, so I'm not sure if they can maybe detect them.
Weasels are like the most terrifying things in the natural world, pretty much of any scale, whether it's like a weasel this big or a wolverine. Like, you do not want to run into a weasel at any, like if you're any kind of creature out in the woods, mountain, anything else, they're scary.
Yeah, for sure. They're sneaky.
You highlighted at the beginning, walking up in the dark in your first time. Why are you walking up the mountains in the dark? We had a question about that.
Oh, we just like to get an early start to the day. So we wake up just before the sun rises. And also it's for the weather because sometimes in the mountains, there's afternoon thunderstorms that start around like 2 or 3 p.m. So we just want to give us like enough time. So we start earlier in the morning.
Okay, very, very cool.
Yeah.
When you're on the mountain, are there dangers you face? Now, you talked about it being a little more challenging, not having necessarily the right food and water, and a little bit further than you might have thought. But is there anything you're worrying about? Like, is it a real danger to trip and fall? Are there things like bears that you need to be concerned about? Anything while you're out there?
I would just say like the hiking is a little bit more extraneous than normal. So, but usually I have hiking poles, so it will help stabilize you a little bit more. But we're not really worried about bears. I think weather is also really important, and lightning and not being up there when there's any storms going on.
Yeah, we have had a lot of mountaineers on in our past, whether it's like climbing Everest for sport and fun, or biologists out in the mountains. And it's the universal thing, like, do not be exposed on a giant high body. If a thunderstorm is coming through, it's about as dangerous a situation as you can get. So I imagine when you're out in the field, you're checking the weather regularly, you know what's going on, you're making sure it's a sunny, beautiful day before you go up at all, yes?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, we are. Mm-hmm.
Now, you talked about this a bit at the end, but I want to highlight it because it's always a question we get. Is there a favorite part of your job? Is it releasing the pikas? Is it traipsing up and being at the top of the mountain? You don't have to hike up higher anymore. Anything you can share?
I think releasing them is just the best. We walk with them, holding them in our shirts in a little bag, and then we get to take them back to their habitat. And that's just like a really cool experience to like connect with them and also just release them back to where we found them. And then also I'd say, I guess this is two things, but like finding them the years after is really cool because you're like, oh, look, like that pika was here, the summer before and it survived the winter. And then you get to see that it's doing perfectly well after you trapped it the first time. So
So a few things to unpack there, because you talked about putting them in your shirt. And I know this from bat biology. We've had a bunch of people there, but to our student audience who would have no idea why you're doing that, why do you have the pikas in your shirt? Tell us more.
Just so we can carry them back to their habitat, really, and we keep it open so that they're able to breathe. And it's just a more stable way so that our hands aren't touching them, so that they can just kind of rest in a little hammock in our shirt.
There's nothing about keeping them warm. I'm interested with that. But when it is bats, it's making sure that they're at a stable body temperature the whole time so they don't get too cold, but they don't have that problem, or no?
I'm not sure, but I think pikas, they have a hot body temperature as it is. So maybe that's not a factor for pikas, but that's interesting with the bats. I didn't know that.
So how often do you release them? Because this looks, as I said, it looks like the absolute greatest thing of all time. Is this every time you're going out in the field, you're releasing pikas, or is it a very rare occurrence? What's the deal?
So we usually only do trapping every year. And then every year it kind of depends on how many pikas we get in the trap. So some years we get like 20. Last year we only got about 3. So it's like kind of in that range, usually more around 15 or 20. And then every person gets to circulate.
Oh, we lost you for a sec, Karli. While we're waiting for Karli's internet to kick back into high gear, I'll take a look and make sure she's all good to go. I just want to do a quick note. Again, if you want to learn more about pikas, there is an amazing article in the Frontiers collection, so you can check that out there. Frontiers for Young Minds, again, amazing research, just generally if you're keen on science and exploration. And as I said, If Then She Can has been a huge partner of ours, 20 plus broadcasts now featuring some of the coolest women like Karli on planet Earth. So lots to explore there if you are inclined after the broadcast is done. We've also got 6 more programs in this series at our If Then page. If you want to check out Katie Croft Bell coming on later today to talk about deep sea, helping forests, all sorts of other cool stuff, it's all right there. It looks like we got Karli back, so I don't need to talk anymore. Karli, welcome back. This is having fun. Something's going wrong with the internet every time. Otherwise, it's not interesting. So sorry, you were right in the middle of answering that. I just want to come back to it. I don't know right where you cut off. I did that a little bit there. Do you want to repeat your answer for that last question?
Yeah, could you repeat what the question was?
That's what I'm trying to remember too. I'm so sorry. We'll skirt around it. Well, we were talking about how often you release them and how rare it is.
Oh, right. So we usually only do it every year, and we usually only trap about 15 individuals. So I last year got to release 2 pikas, and then this year I got to release 1. So I've only ever released 3. So it's a pretty special experience, I'd say.
Okay, well, I hope you get like 10 this year. Just ignore the other people in the lab. Take all the pika responsibility. Now, you talked about recatching them, so we're going to harp on this for a second. How do you know you've caught the same pika? Is there a transmitter on it? Are there little tags in the feet? Anything you can share? We had a query about that.
Yeah, so we never try to trap the pika a second time, but how we know is because we put colored ear tags on their ears when we trap them. So each individual has a special ear tag code because there's different colors for the front and the back of their ears on each side. So usually if we trap a pika that has an ear tag in the trap, we just let them go because we don't want to have to redo that process with them. But what we do is we look with binoculars and we see the pikas out that have ear tags, and then we can just mark if they survived the year. So we do that every year after we've trapped them.
Very, very cool. How about that? Out of curiosity, we did a program recently with Lucky Peak up in Idaho who studies birds, and they banned them. And we asked about the fact that they put this clasp on them, and in some biological systems, for lack of a better phrase, that impacts how the other birds feel about that bird, whether they're more attractive, less attractive. Do you know about any of that with pikas? Like if you give them an ear tag, do the other pikas go like, oh my gosh, what a great ear tag? Or are they like, wow, that guy's like a hawk magnet. I'm not going to go anywhere near him. Is there any data on this or no?
I know we've definitely talked about it, but I'm not sure that we've seen that there's an effect, or at least a negative effect, on them having ear tags. And they don't really seem to be bothered by having the ear tags either. But I guess there could be some interaction with that.
I'm glad that this is an active research question. See, this is the fun of science, is that we're always trying to find new things. It's one of the joys of these broadcasts.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Karli, time flies when you're having fun, so we are nearing the end of the program. Is there any last message about getting out in the field, about pikas, anything to leave our kids with today before we say farewell?
I would just say if you ever get the experience to go out and see pikas or to go up and experience the mountains, I would take that chance because I really, really enjoy it and love it. And I think everybody should enjoy and love pikas.
I'm as the Canadian side of this audience, I've got to say that Alberta, which is like the exact northern equivalent of everywhere that Karli works, it's like the gem of the Canadian wild. So if you want to see anywhere in the Rockies, it's a really, really special part of this planet to explore. I hope all our kids get that chance. And in the meantime, you can check out more stuff again on that collection, learn about pikas, get involved and excited. Karli, it's been so much fun having you. Thank you so much for joining today and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you so much for having me.